It has been one hell of a year. 2022 is almost over. Well, what exactly do I look forward to in 2023? I look forward to asking out a guy. I look forward to spending time with my family, to new video games, to advancing in my career. I look forward to many other things as well. I look forward to the good, to the bad. This party I am at is pretty amazing. We are currently watching the ball drop. Right now, it's 11:58, 2022. Hey, maybe that man was right. Maybe history does repeat itself, and in 2023, COVID will be over. Maybe the war with Russia and Ukraine will be over. Well, and now the clock reads 11:59. We are drinking, we are counting down. 11, 10, 9, 8. We are getting excited. So excited that we cannot contain ourselves. 3, 2, 1. The champagne broke, and everything seemed great until we all were in abject horror. The atomic clock read 11:60.
So I lived in the same house for about 10 years or so when this happened. Now I live at a dorm, and quite a few scary things happened to me and my sister as we shared a bedroom. We're only 3 years apart and both girls. She also didn't like to sleep alone at that time, like most kids. Well, about 5 years into living into that house, my sister was about 10 and she was at the top bunk of our bunk bed. In the middle of the night, she suddenly screamed, and I woke up asking what happened. She said she looked over the bunk bed rail and saw a figure in white, a female, walking around. For the sake of keeping her calm, I told her it was me getting up to get a drink. She accepted it and went back to sleep. It wasn't me. Since then, nothing happened until we moved into a different room in the house, switching rooms with her parents since they were putting down new carpet. After that first week, I started getting woken up in the middle of the night from different things. Some of them were just something smacking my bed, like with a large book. Several times I woke up with someone whispering into my ear. I would hear things fall to the floor, but in the morning nothing had. There was only one time I ever saw anything, and I believe it to be a different, spirit than the one that woke me up all the time. It was standing over my bed, and for the few seconds I saw it, I saw my grandfather who died when I was 10. This was kind of weird, but I was almost expecting it, as 4 other people in my family had seen his spirit, and my grandmother thinks he's watching over us and keeping bad away. I screamed, and after that I stopped being woken up in the morning by whatever until it came back for a few months, but there were fewer incidents. Ever since I moved to my dorm room, there's been nothing, which is good. The only noise I hear is the person next door getting ready for work at 3 in the morning. And now, since my sister has taken over my bed at home because there was a spider on hers and my bed was more comfortable, I've been sleeping in the guest/game room, my older brother's old room. I haven't had anything happen to me. Still, just thinking about it makes me freak out.
Everybody knows that if you surf the web for long enough, you'll find some pretty sick shit. This is especially true if you intentionally dwell into the dark underbelly of the internet. I've seen quite a few things that I don't care to admit to, but one thing that I'll always remember is a site called normalpornfornormalpeople.com. The first strange thing about the site is that I didn't actually find it by looking for it. It was emailed to me by someone I didn't know. The email was as follows. Hi there. Found this site and it's very nice. Thought you might like it. Normalpornfornormalpeople.com. Pass it on for the good of mankind. Pretty standard issue chain letter, although the URL and the last remark really piqued my curiosity. I was having a very boring day when I got this, so I made sure my antivirus was working and then I clicked on it. It was a very average, very generic looking site. It gave the impression that the creators just barely gave a shit about making it look professional. The author seemed to have a very tenuous grasp on English, and on the front of the page was a long, boring, and incoherent rant that I don't remember or have saved. The site had a strange tagline, which, even today, people haven't quite figured out what the meaning of it is. It was Normal Porn for Normal People, a website dedicated to the eradication of abnormal sexuality. And from the sound of that, I wasn't sure whether I was here to watch porn or if I had stumbled onto some kind of eugenics program. But I was here now and I was very, very curious to see what normal people got their rocks off to. So I scrolled down through the rant and nothing. The page didn't seem to link to anywhere else, so I was about to leave and I noticed every word of the rant was its own hyperlink. So I clicked on them. It was sent to a white page with very long list of links in the form of normalpornfornormalpeople.com/random letters. So I stopped for a minute and asked myself if I really wanted to waste God knows how much time clicking through random links that will likely give me a virus and will rape my computer. I just figured I'd try it for maybe 5 minutes just to see if anything came up. I clicked one of the links and was sent to another page. This page apparently had totally different URLs from the last one. I was just about to say fuck this, then I clicked on the third link and a video download came up. It was called peanut.avi. It was a 35-minute video of a man, a woman, and a dog in a kitchen. The woman would make a peanut butter sandwich, then the man would set it down for the dog to eat. This is all that happened, for 35 minutes. It was obvious that the cameraman had to stop filming and wait until the dog was ready to eat again, and the dog seemed rather sick by the end of it. I know what you're thinking. What the hell does this have to do with porn? I have no clue. I've seen a little over 24 videos from this site, and the majority had no sexual activity at all. After watching peanut.avi, I went on a certain image board I frequent to play online show and tell, like I always do with some weird shit like this, but someone had already made a thread about it. Some guy who had received the same chain letter I did. The image board thread got lots of people with nothing better to do than dig through the site, and this is how I saw the other videos. Most of the 24 videos were very uneventful, and consisted of people talking to the cameraman in a room with nothing in it but a desk and a few chairs. I mean literally nothing on the walls or in terms of furniture. The whole room had a very cold, sterile feel to it. The conversations were just idle banter about previous jobs or embarrassing childhood moments. I kept expecting some kind of discussion about what the people were filming or what the site was about, but of course, nothing. You would never know these videos had anything to do with porn if you saw it out of context. I will say one thing though, the people who appeared in these videos were quite attractive. However, the other videos that actually did feature content which I was supposed to be called sexual is where things got weird. I'll give you a brief description of some of the stranger videos. If you're really eaten up with curiosity, you can try to hunt them down on a torrent site. Lickedclean.avi, a 10-minute video filmed by a hidden camera in which we see a repairman working on a washing machine for the first 2 minutes. When it's fixed, the repairman talks to the owner briefly, and then leaves. The owner checks to make sure the repairman is gone, and begins to lick all over the top of the washing machine. This goes on for 7 minutes. Jimbo.avi, a 5-minute video of an obese mime performing his act. It was actually pretty funny, particularly one part where he pretends to pull up a chair, then pretends that it breaks because of his own weight. In the last 30 seconds of the video, the camera cuts to static briefly and cuts back to the man sobbing quietly, still wearing a mime outfit and makeup, some kind of obscure fetish? Diana.avi, a 4-minute video in which the cameraman talks to a woman in a room different from the interview room. This room looks a lot like one you'd find in a normal person's house. Exactly where they are is never specified, as Diana only talks about her violin playing. She obviously plays the violin, but she keeps getting distracted by something. I didn't notice this until someone on the image board thread pointed it out, but if you look at the mirror in the background, you can see a fat man in a chicken suit masturbating. Jessica.avi, another 4-minute cameraman video. This time he's outside a house, talking to another young woman. They talk about canoe rides. The camera zooms out to reveal the city streets behind them occasionally. The strange thing is, no one so far has been able to identify where the street is. Guesses have ranged everywhere from Europe to Australia to the Philippines, but there's yet to be a match for the street shown in the video. Tonguetied.avi. 10-minute video. The first 5 minutes consist of an elderly woman making out with a mannequin. The video cuts out like it did in Jimbo.avi halfway through, and the scene is now a group of mannequins huddled together in a circle around the camera. The lights have been dimmed, and the elderly woman is nowhere to be seen. From this point on, there is no sound. Stumps.avi. 5-minute long video where a man with no legs is attempting to breakdance on a DDR mat in what looks like the kitchen from Peanut.avi, but much dirtier. There's a radio playing music unseen in the background, but it stops at the 4-minute mark when the man collapses on the mat in exhaustion. He breathes heavily and pleads at someone off-screen to let him rest. This off-screen person becomes terrifyingly enraged and yells at him to keep dancing, which he does. You can hear this off-screen person begin to scream as the video ends abruptly. Privacy.avi. The woman from Diana.avi is masturbating on a mattress in the interview room, while the man from Stumps.avi walks around on his hands while wearing some kind of goblin mask. The door in this room was always closed in other videos, but now it's open. In this video, the only light is in the room, and the hallway is dark. Near the end of the video, you can see the animal quickly run through the hallway. And finally, the last video we uncovered, Useless.avi. In this 18-minute video, a blonde woman from one of the previous interview videos is tied down to a mattress in the interview room. She attempts to scream, but her mouth is taped over. After 7 minutes, a man in a black suit and mask opens the door, but he does not enter. He holds the door open for the animal that was running in the hall in the previous video. It's revealed to be an adult chimpanzee, its hair shaved and its entire body painted red. It seems to be starved and abused, with several wounds along its shoulders and back. When the chimp enters the room, the masked man closes the door behind it. The chimpanzee sniffs the air for a moment. It may have been blind, and notices the woman tied to the mattress. It goes into a frenzy and begins to maul her. The assault goes on for a grueling 7 minutes until the woman finally dies. The chimp eats flesh from her corpse for 4 minutes as the video ends. The thread exploded with activity after this video was uncovered, and people discussed it long into the night. When I came back to the image board the next day, I found that the thread was deleted. I tried to start another one, and they banned me. I tried emailing the guy who sent me the chain letter with the site's URL. I even sent him 5 messages, but I never got a response. I have tried to discuss this website on various places, and I got banned frequently. The site itself was also deleted about 3 days after Useless.avi was uncovered, likely because someone contacted the authorities about it. The only proof that normal porn for normalpeople.com ever existed was a few screen caps people took, and videos from the site that people saved and uploaded on torrents, the most popular of which being Useless.avi, which found its way onto a few gore sites. Wherever you upload them to, all of the videos from normal porn for normalpeople.com get deleted after a while.
Final Christmas, the Santa. What is the final Christmas and who is the Santa? Peace on earth and goodwill toward humanity, gifts and treats, presents under the tree. Winter holidays are a staple in most cultures, and none is more famous than Kris Kringle himself, going around the world and dropping off presents to well-behaved children. A point to gather together on the longest, coldest, darkest nights, and through harmony and familial relationships. A reflection on the year that passed and looking forward to the year to come. Basically a familiar celebration to recharge one's spiritual, mental and emotional batteries. So it's particularly upsetting to this agent that they have to write up an incident report related to Christmas about a being that named themselves as the Santa and the damage it did that had to be contained. Now, through research and analysis, this creature isn't actually the Santa of modern depiction of the man with rosy cheeks and big shaky belly, nor of the Dutch origin of a saint that gave small wooden toys to the good girls and boys of the towns around him. This wasn't a creature that has always been around. This isn't even about Krampus, the goat-legged spirit who kidnaps bad children, sticking them in a sack full of coal and beating the bag heavily with a stick. No, This Santa was formerly a human, one Chris Kringleston, who thought his own mental hang-ups and bad luck was able to trigger a transformation into an anomalous creature of some strength. Using the agency Sears, we were able to piece together what happened, and combined with the things found in his apartment and reading his emails, it's not a pretty story of what went down. Kringleston's name was probably just a coincidence or something his parents were unthinking about when they named him. Or maybe they wanted to be in them, because Chris was born on December 25th. And like most children who were born on that day, his birthday took a backseat to the Christmas holiday. It's hard to have a birthday party when everyone is home opening presents and people always expect him to live up to the archetype of Santa, to be cheerful and merry, to, yes, love candy and treats. It was enough to make the kid annoyed as a kid, angry as a teenager, and bitter as an adult. It didn't help that life wasn't the kindest to Kringleston. He wasn't a particularly even-tempered person. And all the treats people almost force-fed him from young distinctly increased his weight, making him look more like Santa, especially with his super light blonde and almost silver hair, giving the matching look with his large weight. The Santa jokes followed him for most of his life. And even though he went to college and graduated top of his class in law school, his appearance meant it was hard to take him seriously, leaving him stuck as a paralegal who people always expected to work pro bono, something that would match what the real Santa would do. Again, the stresses of life and such. But Kringleston did have an outlet. Probably it started as a way to rebel against the image forced upon him by name and appearance. But Chris was greatly interested in the occult, and not the gentle supernatural stuff of the nature you'd find in Christmas movies or children's films, but the deep, dark world of occult, the one of blood drawing, sacrificing small animals and paying worship of demonic-looking entities. Kringleston was not a nice boy, and the dark things he looked into, research and acquired, it was a way to counteract the image that had been forced on him as a child. One of the ways he liked to vent was to acquire new items for his collection, books, paintings and even artifacts of the occult, including his latest purchase, a present to himself from the shady internet dealer he usually deals with for all his black magic goods. The person claimed he had on him the blood of the Greater One, of a being whose hands can touch the sky and bring down the sky. Chris didn't know what that meant, but considering the owner of his paralegal company just ordered him to dress up like Santa for the holiday party, he decided to treat himself and purchase the blood, and promptly forgot about it as the costume for Santa was just delivered to his door. He was going to hate the following weeks. Worst is that his boss had told the office that he was going to be the party's Santa. So now Kringleston had to deal with all of his co-workers getting drunk, spilling drinks on him and trying to crawl onto his lap to make a nice list. And he was bitter enough to ignore the women asking if they were on his naughty list. After his last girlfriend turned out to be a Santa chaser, he's pretty much given up on romance for the time being. So the day of the holiday party arrived, and with it so did his package, the item he bought that the drama of the holidays made him forget about, the blood of the Greater One. A little excited and ignoring how rosy made his cheeks, he opened up the package and saw a glass tube topped with a cork and sealed with wax. It was his order, and it didn't look like ordinary blood. For one, it was way too black to be blood, and two, it was cold to the touch, as in very cold to the touch. It was interesting, and he was looking forward to investigating it more. But then he saw the time and saw he was going to be late to the torture event. Luckily, he already had the costume on, so he could just head out. Absent-mindedly, he put the container he just got in the suit pocket and left for the event, hoping that the party wasn't going to be as bad as he feared. It was. A bunch of obviously lawyers and paralegals getting drunk, trying to suck up to the partners and making asses out of them and himself. It was one of the few times of the year when everyone was encouraged to let loose and go wild. And what Kringleston really hated was all the stupid Santa jokes and puns that were constantly tossed his way. Each person thinking they were thinking of something new and witty, when it was things Chris had heard 1,000 times growing up. The alcohol was flowing through the party and people were really indulging themselves, including one super drunk lawyer. They suddenly decided that they wanted to sit on Santa's lap for a good joke. So without warning, they hopped onto Chris's lap, and he heard that dreadful crunch as the person landed in his lap at a weird angle and exposed Kringleston to the contents of the glass tube. He felt his lap get sticky, and he made excuses to go to the bathroom, trying not to cuss out the drunk lawyer for breaking his newest acquisition. As he walked towards the bathroom, he reached into his pocket and felt wetness. hissing as he scratched his finger on a few of the glass shards. Kris Kringleston was lucky that he didn't die from the mutagen that he got his hands on. A cocktail of blood from creatures and things that really shouldn't see the light of day. That his supplier actually got his hands on something real and dangerous. Most people would have died a screaming pile of tumors, but not Kris, as he muttered under his breath to the break room to attempt to salvage some of his prize and clean out his suit pocket. He was just sick and tired of the whole holiday, and in his angry internal ranting, he didn't notice that he himself was rapidly mutating and changing, his skin discoloration and limbs elongating and withering. Enough that his Santa pants fell off his waist. Kringleston stumbled as he felt very, very odd, as his silver blonde hair turned ash grey and the skin of his face pulled back, stretching over his elongated skull and making his teeth really prominent. Looking in the mirror, he saw his baby blue eyes turn bloody red, with the rest of his eye turning black, and before he could start to worry, he began to vomit a lot. It was endless as the sink was rapidly filled with blood, vomit, pus, and many things that started to wriggle and grow. Things didn't matter though, because for some odd reason, even after puking like that, Kris Kringleston felt amazing, in a way he has never experienced his whole life. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand what the whole holiday cheer was all about, the nonsense he was always shrugging off. Maybe he was starting to understand the real purpose, and with that purpose, he wanted to share his newfound mentality with all the others at the office. Kris didn't notice himself floating as he gathered all the wriggling worms. They were now the size of a medium-sized dog and were growing still, even rows of saw-like teeth appearing at their ends. He just scooped them up with a handy-dandy sack he had been carrying with him all night, emptying it of the useless presents his boss had forced him to carry and pass out to everyone. No, now he had something much better to give to everyone. The best present that keeps on giving. Kris kicked open the door, leaving behind red pants and a sink filled with blood and vitae. And then he got to the party. He was so happy that the partiers got excited to see him. Why? They even started pointing and screaming in joy now that Santa arrived. What else could he do but open the sack and give them exactly what they deserve? Kris Kringleston opened his sack, and the screams got louder. It just made him smile. It was going to be just the best Christmas, with him and all his new best friends. Now, where else should he go to spread this Yuletide joy? The night is young, after all.
We all have those weird family members, an aunt, uncle, or cousin. But when they come over for Christmas, time for celebration, not my family though. Mike clearly didn't like them as he would get angry with them. Our parties also got smaller over the years. Something tells me we didn't always eat turkey.
My next dream was an insanely tall human, with piss yellow eyes and no pupils, sickly black veins on the outer parts. It was impossibly skinny and had a large chest of both skin and bone. I was sitting around the campfire with my family, and it was dark out, pitch black. At the edge was that Wendigo. I said to my dad, "I see something." He said, "It's nothing." It looked at me and said, "What's the matter?" I have had 2 more dreams. I don't know if moving north was a good idea. I lived in a more suburban area, but now I am far away from my neighbors. The forest outside my house is dense, but not impossible to walk through. There is no noise, no animal or anything. One part of the forest is aspen and the other is large pine trees. The aspen forest is the densest. Every time I am outside, I feel like I'm being watched. I live in northern Wyoming. My teenage dreams were me eating meat and growing larger. I've never seen a real monster before, especially one with a deer or maybe elk's head. It must have been 3 or 4 meters tall. The next day I see something hiding behind 2 trees during the daytime. Its head was half showing on the right with a yellow shine on its right eye. The other left side I saw its pale white arm straight out and I saw part of its legs. I was in the bathroom at the time and I was washing my hands. I looked out the window into the forest and my mouth dropped. I came back to look in the same area to see if it was my eyes playing tricks on me and it was gone. I'm going insane and I've started craving meat. The word starvation keeps playing in my head over and over again. Have become incredibly emaciated, and people look at me like I'm diseased.
This story takes place in the same house as the basement incident from when I was 3 years old. I was about 12 going on 13 at the time and had outgrown my previous bedroom, so my grandparents decided I needed a little more space. They helped me to move my things into the bedroom at the top of the landing on the second floor of the house just next door to my old bedroom. The first few nights I spent in the room were nothing special. Though I did feel a little uneasy at first, I attributed it to being that I was just not used to the room yet, but all the while I couldn't help but feel that I was being watched. About a week after I had moved into my new room, for whatever reason, something had woken me up around 3:30 in the morning. I don't know why, but something just told me to look towards my bedroom door. It was then I saw a faint red glow in my doorway. It looked like someone was burning a candle at the bottom of the stairs. The glow got stronger at first, then after a while, it faded out and disappeared. I tried to brush it off as just my imagination playing tricks on me. I closed my eyes and tried my best to get back to sleep. But not long after I closed my eyes, I heard what sounded like a set of heavy footsteps making their way up the stairs towards my bedroom. There are 13 steps on our staircase leading up to the second floor of our house, and as narrow as our hallway is, you could stop at the second to top step, lean over, and look directly into my bedroom. The footsteps stopped on the 12th step right outside my doorway, and I could feel a pair of eyes looking in on me. My heart was pounding like a drum, and I could barely breathe. I gathered what strength I could and jumped from my bedroom, ran to my bedroom door, and slammed it shut. I then heard the sound of the footsteps making their way back downstairs. I stayed there the rest of the night, huddled up against the back of my bedroom door. The following morning, my grandfather asked if I had woken up in the middle of the night and had gone downstairs into the kitchen. I told him I hadn't, but I did tell him what happened to me that night. He dismissed it as just being my imagination playing tricks on me, and that I was probably just seeing the lights of a passing car. Only one problem with that theory though. Our house is on a side street, and my bedroom doorway faces that street. If I had seen the light of a car going by, it would have come in from the window, not from the staircase outside my door, and it sure as hell wouldn't have been glowing red. My grandmother was able to convince my grandfather to go out and get a new lock for my bedroom door, and he installed it later that night. Several weeks went by without incident, and it was around the middle of spring at this point. I started sleeping with the chain on my bedroom door that my grandfather had installed for me. It took me forever to fall asleep because of the unnerving feeling of someone watching me, but I eventually passed out. I remember every detail of the dream I had that night as if it was just yesterday. I found myself standing in a long, narrow corridor that, from what I remember, looked like a hospital. At one end of the hall, it was all light, so bright that it was blinding. At the other end of the hall, it was pitch black, so dark that you couldn't see a hand in front of your face. I remember feeling as though I was being stared down from the dark end of the hallway. I could just barely make out a figure standing there in the darkness, close enough to where I could just make out its form. It looked like a tall sort of humanoid figure wearing a black robe with a hood up hiding its face. My curiosity got the better of me as I remember slowly moving towards whatever this thing was, trying to get a better look at it. The last thing I remember before waking up was a pair of hands, almost skeletal in appearance, flying right at my face. When I awoke, my bedroom was freezing cold. It was almost like I had woken up in an industrial-sized freezer. Keep in mind it was springtime at this point, and since the house was so old, we had no central air conditioning, so there was no reason for it to be as cold as it was then. I remember lying there in my bed trying to scream out, but not being able to make a sound. I tried to scream as best I could, but all that escaped my lips was a whimper followed by a muffled gasps for air, and I could feel my eyes beginning to water. I tried to roll out of my bed, but I felt like I was being pinned down. My body was frozen, but I remember still being able to move my eyes. Something drew my attention towards my bedroom door again, and I was terrified to see that the chain was off the lock and the door was all the way open. No, it wasn't just slightly open. I mean, this goddamn door had the chain completely ripped off, and the door was completely wide open, almost as though someone had kicked it in with all of their strength. I was overwhelmed with a feeling of dread. It was like a feeling of death in the air. I could see that same figure standing in my bedroom doorway, just as I had seen it in my dream. More like a nightmare, really. I could feel that whatever this thing was, it was trying to get into the room. I could tell that whatever its intentions were, they weren't good, but there was something pushing it back. My grandmother was very devout in her faith as a Christian, and she had portraits of Jesus hanging in all of the bedrooms. As I remembered this, the feeling of dread slowly subsided. I turned my eyes away from the doorway and towards the portrait of Jesus that my grandmother had hung on the wall over my bed. I was then enveloped with a sense of warmth all through my body, from head to toe. It was like that kind of warm feeling you get when you're in the hospital and the nurse wraps you in a heated blanket. Whatever was trying to force its way into my room had finally left me as I glanced back to see it suddenly vanish from my door. That warm feeling stayed with me until I was able to rest again. It didn't take me but a few seconds to fall back asleep after that. I woke early the next morning, and I remember just breaking down into tears as I rolled out of my bed and onto the floor, on my hands and knees, shaking all over. I was still gasping for air. I called out for my grandmother when I finally managed to catch my breath, and she ran in from her bedroom when she heard me crying. I turned my eyes away from the doorway and towards the portrait of Jesus that my grandmother had hung on the wall over my bed. I was then enveloped with a sense of warmth all through my body, from head to toe. It was like that kind of warm feeling you get when you're in the hospital and the nurse wraps you in a heated blanket. Whatever was trying to force its way into my room had finally left me as I glanced back to see it suddenly vanish from my door. That warm feeling stayed with me until I was able to rest again. It didn't take me but a few seconds to fall back asleep after that. I woke early the next morning, and I remember just breaking down into tears as I rolled out of my bed and onto the floor, on my hands and knees, shaking all over. I was still gasping for air. I called out for my grandmother when I finally managed to catch my breath, and she ran in from her bedroom when she heard me crying. She helped me up from the floor and back onto the bed. I told her everything that had happened, and she just sat there with me, holding me in her arms. Once again, I was hit with that same warmth feeling as I sat there wrapped in her arms. That is something I will never forget.
It was dark in a smoky mist and colder than walking out of a hot shower on a winter day. Maeve, drunk as hell, went off to find the balcony and saw her. I couldn't tell if I was terrified or relieved than I felt. The next day I woke up at the public hospital. I got released at dawn. I went to a local cafe to get a cup of coffee. I saw her once again. She looked at me. I walked cautiously and I asked her to At the other night, everyone around me looked at me like I was crazy and said I was in my house last night. Then I walked out puzzled. I had no doubt that she was at my friend's house with me and at least 50 more people. Later that day, there was a banging on my front door. I opened it, and 2 police cars were in my driveway. They said, "Sir, you have been convicted for the murder of Lucy Jane Mears." Confused, I said I have no idea who she is. So I asked for a picture. It was the girl who I saw this morning and last night. They said her body was discovered 3 weeks ago.
They say your New Year's resolution is something you should look forward to. Something you should be happy about. Something you should generally praise, but no one really follows their New Year's resolution, do they? No one really follows what they say they'll do. That bugs me. Honestly, I just want to say, I really am happy that I finally have kept my New Year's resolution. I had the resolution to do whatever it took to keep myself happy. Well, first of all, I exercised more and also spent more time with friends. That was amazing. It made me so much happier. And then came June, my birthday. So amazing. Long story short, it was amazing. And I don't know what to say. It is just one of those years. And I finally may be the first human to break and continue my New Year's resolution. But what really came to a head, or that I knew I was serious about this, that nagging thought in my head, the thing that noticed, the one thing that hindered me from true happiness. I hated them. And only could I follow my New Year's resolution if I slit their throats while they slept.
When my sister was 7 years old, she used to tell us how strange people climbed up the tree next to her window, and they'd come into her bedroom. They had big eyes and long mouths, and they would stand there, sway back and forth, and watch her. She would scream as loud as she could, and they would leave. I remember when she could barely sleep in her own bed, she'd creep into my room, unfold her sleeping bag on the floor, terrified. Now, she hasn't had any encounters with the so-called strange people that climb through her bedroom window. They become nothing more than a faint, a somewhat chilling, a bad dream to her. My parents brush it off as nothing but nightmares. I never knew what to think of it back then. I didn't want to think about it. What's happened to me now has caused me to recount those troubling memories of my little sister and the strangers that visited her. One night, I woke in a panic. I lay there in my bed, paralyzed, and my eyes widened. There was nothing forcing me down. I just chose not to move, out of fear. That night was a bit of a blur, but I remember that it was raining hard, and the wind was blowing unrelenting against the house. The weather station hadn't mentioned anything about a rainstorm that night, but then again, weather stations do tend to do nothing but make mistakes. The combination of rain and wind was astonishingly loud. I couldn't hear the ruffling of my sheets, my rapid breathing, or even my own heartbeat. I remember bolting upright and staring at my cat, who was sleeping at the end of my bed. He was wide awake, and he was looking at me with terrified, round eyes. He seemed to be meowing at me, but I couldn't hear him. It seemed like my room was filling with lights and then dimming back down to darkness, and vice versa, over and over again. It was disorienting and strange, and sometimes it seemed like my curtains were open and other times they were closed, but I wasn't sure. Soon I heard a noise rise above the deafening rainstorm. It was the only sound rivaling the wind and the rain. It was clear. It was audible. It sounded strange, a mix between the hoots of an owl and the cries of a loon. It throbbed and ebbed and began to get louder and louder until it swallowed up the sound of the storm. I vividly remember turning to look at the clock on my nightstand. I pushed the light on and the time read 4 o'clock a.m. I heard our garage door shudder, almost like it was shaken violently in an earthquake. My eyes stayed glued on the clock. I noticed that it was changing. The clock began to switch to all sorts of numbers before it began to switch rapidly into letters and then symbols I'd never seen before in my life. My cat was still meowing at me. Lights seemed to fill the room and disappear altogether, and the face of my clock turned to snowy static, the kind you get on a television set, just like when you see stars after you get your picture taken. Strange and unnerving symbols flashed before my eyes, and then nothing. I woke the next morning, groggy. My curtains were closed. My cat was curled up at the end of my bed, sound asleep. When I looked out my window, it was sunny, and there were no leaves strewn about. The roads weren't damp, and no trees had fallen. When I told my story to my family, they just told me it must have been a very realistic dream. When I questioned them about the rainstorm, they were all confused. There had been no rainstorm that night, and my sister swore there wasn't because she's always easily awoken by storms. I decided it had been nothing more than a very strange dream. However, that very day, all our appliances and electronics didn't work. The cable was out for an hour. The internet was disconnected. cell phones and iPods were shutting themselves on and off, even though they've been fully charged for a while. Even the simplest things, like my mom's coffee machine or the microwave, they were all acting up. They all eventually worked, later in the evening or the next day, but it was very unnerving. Our house phone had staticky connections after that night for 2 months before they finally fried out and we had to buy new ones. I eventually felt compelled to ask my sister about the strange people that used to visit her when she was little. She refused to talk about them, and when I tried to pry her for information, she would flat out ignore me. After that night, I've never had another experience like that. I used to be a bit afraid of going to bed at night or even using my clock, but I pulled myself together and I got over it. But there has been something that has happened ever since then that does have me questioning a few things. My cat never used to do this. Our front door has 2 long windows on the side of it so you can look out on the porch. Every day, my cat will sit there and stare out the window at nothing, like he's waiting. That's silly. I know. I mean, why would he? Look, I don't believe we're alone in the universe, but could I have maybe whatever happened that night is still in my memory. Vaguely. I'm reminded of it every now and then because of my cat's strange new habit. And even though I said that I've been able to lay down in bed and go to sleep just like I used to before the strange event that unfolded that night at 4 in the morning, I always stay awake just a little longer after midnight. Because the only thing I can tell myself or anyone else is don't trust the dark. And watch your windows.
My father was a musician in Khan Yunis. During the Israeli occupation, pre-2006, the sound of his music filled the air. To other people, it was a symbol of hope. To the fascist Israelis, it was a symbol of defiance. As New Year came, the International New Year, it marked a symbol of hope. As he brought his music, the significant sound still haunts me. They slit his throat while he slept. And at this point, the music still can be heard.
If everything was still alright, I heard the sounds of thunder and rain beating against the house. As I took a sip of my beer, I was curled up on the couch, watching the ending to a horror movie, Annihilation or something like that. I like to watch how things turn out, all the twists and turns leading to the inevitable end. It was always fun to guess. It's too bad we didn't predict how this would end correctly. Maybe we could have made a difference. I take a deep breath, reminding myself of the problem in the room with me. I steal a sideways glance at the figure in the recliner, making shivers crawl down my spine. They were covered in a wet sheet that was laying around. The body stunk of high heaven and gave me nightmares. At first, I have become numb to it for the most part. Especially when I'm stuck in the house with the damned sun. I look outside, seeing the shows going on outside. Everyone has stopped covering, no longer staying inside, or bothering to help. Now that everyone is presumed to die, I heard something move. Turning to my right, I see the corpse of my mother sit up, making me freeze. She turns to look at me with her milky eyes. Groaning, I calmed and made peace with my life, thinking how this would be a good end to a movie.
My family never interested or believed in the supernatural or superstitions and thought they were only just fictional stories or tales to scare kids or people away. But that all changed when we moved into this house. When I used to live in Germany, I lived in a very small town that wasn't well known. There were about over 2,000 people living there, but it wasn't special and kind of a quiet out in the middle of nowhere place. When I was very young, around 5 or 6, my parents recently got a divorce, so we moved into this very old home that has been around since World War II and had had an interesting history with the previous owners being unknown. The house had two parts, with the downstairs being another house connected to the upstairs house. My grandma lived downstairs with her art studio, as we lived upstairs from her. After 2 weeks since moving in, my sister was sick and my mom was at work, while I was with my babysitter at the park. My grandmother was taking care of my sister at the time, while she was alone with her at the house. My grandma decided to go outside for some fresh air in the backyard, while my sister fell asleep in her room in the upstairs portion of the house. While she was outside, she remembered she forgot to feed her rabbit, which was downstairs in the dining room. My grandma was in her mid-50s, but had a sight for sore eyes and was very keen on strange things going on. As my grandma got up, she felt an eerie feeling of someone watching her from the dining room window that looks out through my backyard. Turning around, she sees this full figure of a girl with light blonde hair and pale skin. She looked around my sister's age, 8, but she couldn't make out the face of who it was since they were standing in the corner of the window. My grandma was concerned that it was my sister who needed something from her, so she walked up to the upstairs to go check on her in her room, but she was sound asleep. When my sister woke up, my grandma recalled the moment and questioned her if it was her who was looking at her through the window. My sister was dazed and very confused and didn't really understand the question. She replied with, "I was asleep the whole time. I don't remember getting up for anything until dinner was ready." My grandma had a pale face. She was spooked and didn't mention what happened that morning after what my sister said to her. A few days later, my mom had a best friend who was considered her boyfriend at the time. They were in a very serious relationship and were planning on him moving in with us. He was also very young, around his mid-20s, and was very wealthy. He helped my mom out with getting a job, so she was very loyal to him. My mom invited him for dinner after work so that he was welcomed into our family and wanted us to meet him. When he walked through the door of our house, he had a weird feeling surrounding him and said that he felt very cold and nauseous. He didn't like the hallway of our house, as it goes from the kitchen to my room, which is at the end of the hall. It would always be dark in that hallway because the lights would break unexpectedly, so we kinda just gave up with having a light in the hallway. When he walked through the entrance, he went to the dining room to sit down. My sister sat next to me on the right end of the table and my grandma on the left of hers, with my mom across the table from her. Her boyfriend was sitting on the front part of the table facing me. While we were eating, my mom's boyfriend thought that he saw a flower vase move across the windowsill. Moving his head up, he saw the same white figure my grandma saw. He turned white as a sheet as it darted from the dining room to the living room and disappeared right in front of him into the next room. He dropped his silverware and flew back on his chair before grabbing his coat and dashing out of the house. He slammed the door hard enough to almost break the glass and later broke up with my mom after explaining what happened that night and vowed to never step foot in that house ever again. My mom got concerned as she was very confused on what had just happened and said he was overreacting, but was really heartbroken from him dumping her. A couple of more weird things started happening and became more frequent and violent as the weeks flew by. The clock in the kitchen would always rewind every hour. Light bulbs were being smashed and shattered everywhere. Kitchen drawers would be open, faucets would be turned on, and our furniture would be moved around. My mom got really fed up with the issue and didn't really understand what was going on. She would constantly blame me or my sister for misbehaving, but knew that it wasn't our faults and couldn't explain the unexpected and weird things that were going on until she told the neighbors that lived across from us the recent and old news that have happened since we lived in that house. Our neighbor was very curious, yet understood my mom's situation, so he invited her to have lunch with him to discuss it. The next day after, we visited the neighbor, told my mom some creepy information that made my mom's opinion on ghosts become more open and refreshed about the house and the area that we lived in. This area used to be a Jewish community before it was blown up by the Nazis in World War II and rebuilt as forts and houses. It was a massacre with lots of Jews being killed and sent off to camps. If you look through the bushes in your backyard, There are old gravestones hiding between the bushes and some rubble left from the houses and buildings in this area. My mom had chills all over her. Her red flags were going off and she turned pale in fear. However, my mom was reasonable and wanted to send the ghosts to a better place in peace. So she went to a synagogue to get a rabbi to cleanse the house so we can continue to live in it. He agreed to do so, and my mom thought her blessings were answered. By the time he arrived back to our house, he took a 180 and went from agreeing to refusing to cleanse the house from whatever is haunting it. He told my mom that there's too much evil in the atmosphere and refused to help her and told her to find someone else to help her with this situation. My mom decided that it was our time to leave and leave quickly. We packed everything up as fast as we could, making sure nothing is left behind or something could follow us on our way out. She took all of us into the car and sped off with our packed boxes and left the house completely, never saying goodbye to anyone, and just left without turning back. She swears to this day that whatever happened in that house will never be talked about again because of the amount of fright she had from living there, and will never step back into the town we lived in.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching this far into the video. Well, if you made it this far, seems you like it, so why not give it a like and share it around. Also, it really helps if you subscribe, especially in the algorithm. And the first 100 subscribers, when we hit 1,000, will be shared off. Don't worry, I'm writing down a list, already have 5 people. But, yeah. Also, I would like to thank the following people: Asriel Werikai, Joseph Klember, Tabana Hot, Chills, Dylan, Redacted, Clark Titor, and Jerry Foltzen for helping in this video. And yeah, happy holidays everyone. I guess they are almost over by the time this is going up. This is going up on Wednesday the 28th. But I want to say happy holidays, and well, like always, if you see anything, just remember,